Well, joining us now via Skype from Pennsylvania, but right now in Arizona, is author and journalist Dan Leroy to talk about his Sophia Institute published book, Liberty Lions, the Catholic Revolutionaries who established America. Dan, thanks so much for being with us. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Jay, Bishop Reed.
Hey,
Kevin,
Dan.
great to talk to all of you.
I have to tell you something, Dan. Something has happened to Catholic TV that has never happened before. As we prepared for the show, because you were the guest, we weren't on air, we were listening to the Beastie Boys in the background.
What a great day this is. What a great confluence of these two great influences in my life. I just want to thank you guys for making it happen.
Well, it was a welcome change from the Gregorian chant. Let's just put it that way.
We love the Gregorian chant, by the way, just so everyone's clear. Well, appropriately enough, we kick off the celebration of Independence Day with your great book, which shares the roles of Catholics during the fight for independence during a time when Catholics were considered really second-class citizens. Tell us why Catholics joined the revolution, even then when they were ridiculed on what was known as Pope's Day.
Well, that's the $64 billion question of the book. And I don't think there's a single answer to it, but there are several ideas explored in Liberty's Lions. And the first is Catholic leadership. You know, Catholics weren't just patriots, they were leaders of the patriot cause. Founders like Charles Carroll of Carrollton were respected by Catholics and non-Catholics alike. And their influence undoubtedly carried a significant amount of weight with their co-religionists. Another reason it doesn't get talked about as much is the work of circuit riding priests who carried the Catholic faith throughout the colonies during this time of repression. You have Jesuit priests like Charles Carroll's cousin, Father John Carroll, Father Ferdinand Farmer, Father Pierre Gabault out west. And these priests brought not just the faith, but also a belief in the patriot cause. And they must have also had a pretty great amount of sway over their flocks. And then there's a third reason, which is that colonial Catholics, and they were led by the example of Catholics in Maryland, they'd already started to think of themselves as separate from England. You know, religious tolerance was practiced imperfectly in the colonies, but it had been practiced. And with revolution, there was the promise of more. So Liberty's Lions makes the argument that the roots of the patriot cause actually lie in this belief that Catholics had seen before a lot of their fellow colonists, that it was time to leave England behind.
You know, Dan, I sometimes feel like a circuit riding priest, bishop. I feel like I'm always on the road somewhere. So I get that, how it must have been back in the day. And, you know, and for us today as Americans, we expect to be able to practice our faith and worship freely. But I know that during the revolutionary times, that wasn't the case. Can you just give us kind of a broad brush look at the landscape for Catholics back in those days?
Jay said it best just a moment ago, second-class citizens. They were second-class citizens all the way, even if they had as much money as Charles Carroll of Carrollton, who was one of the richest men in the colonies. They couldn't vote. They couldn't hold public office. Philadelphia is the only place, this still amazes me, the only place in the British Empire up until the Revolution where you could attend a public mass. Otherwise, you're going to be served by one of those circuit riders that we just mentioned. If you wanted your child to have a good Catholic education, you had to send them overseas. And not only do you get to send them on a very, very dangerous sea crossing from which they may not return, but you have to pay an exorbitant amount of tax. In Maryland, £100 just for the privilege of sending your kid overseas to get a Catholic education. So this is a time when Catholics were called to do a lot of sacrifice and a lot of suffering for their beliefs, and they did, much to our benefit.
What did Washington and the Founding Fathers think of Catholicism?
Washington is unlike any of the other founders. You know, you mentioned at the beginning Pope's Night. And Pope's Night sounds like a fun Catholic evening, but it really wasn't. It was an excuse throughout the Northeast to get drunk, to burn the Pope in effigy, and pretty much indulge in as much virulent anti-Catholicism as you wished. And it was tied to the celebration of the gunpowder plot, November 5th, which is a tradition carried over from England. When Washington becomes commander-in-chief of the Continental Army in 1775, one of the first things he does is says, look, we're going to put a stop to this because we cannot ask our fellow citizens who are Catholics to join our cause if we're going to insult them publicly in this way. And he did put an end to this tradition, which was a pretty long-standing tradition throughout the colonies.
my understanding, Dan, that you came back to the faith a little over 5 years ago, I think. What drew you as a Catholic to this historical research?
Bishop, I'm happy to say that it all happened in the Perpetual Adoration Chapel in my home parish of St. Monica in the Diocese of Pittsburgh. I was reading Magnificat. I was reading a column by Professor Anthony Esselin called How the Church Changed the World. This column happened to be about the Polish revolutionary Casimir Pulaski, who was the father of the American cavalry. And at the end of this column, Professor Esselin said, you know, there were some other Catholics who were pretty significant contributors to the revolutionary cause. So I went looking for the book that would put all of their contributions together under one set of covers. I couldn't find it, so I set out to write it myself.
I noticed, by the way, you're a bit of a revolutionary yourself. You're bringing back the ascot.
Thank you for mentioning that, Bishop. It's a cause that doesn't have a lot of adherents. It's for the very few, but you know, when somebody notices it, as you just did, that makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, I try to bring up clothing causes too, and I usually get ridiculed here at Catholic TV.
Yeah, it usually doesn't work.
You must be a historian of some type too. To write a book about the Revolutionary War, must be something that you've researched for years just in general. You must be a historian buff.
Well, here's what I am actually. I would say I grew up in a household where history was important. My mother's a great historian, a great genealogist. She always made it clear to my brother and me that it's important to know where you come from. It's important to know how one historical event leads to another. So from an early age, I've been hearing these stories, and I've just had the great good fortune to grow up in a place where that kind of thing is valued. I don't know that that's true every place today, but I was lucky enough to have that kind of upbringing.
Well, who should read Liberty Lions, Dan, and where can they get a copy and learn more about your work, because you have other books as well?
I do. Well, first of all, I hope Catholics will read it, and I hope they'll realize, if they don't already, that Catholicism was instrumental in our nation's founding, and that they have a lot to be proud of, because they've sometimes been told that they don't. I hope non-Catholics will read it as well and realize that there might be something to learn in this example of colonial Catholics and how they bore up heroically to government interference in their spiritual lives, and how they believed, sometimes against what probably seemed like a lot of evidence to the contrary, that the American ideal really was and is worth sacrifice and suffering. I can't think of a better time than now, on the eve of Independence Day weekend, to make that appeal to my fellow Americans. Where can they get the book? They can get it from the publisher, SophiaInstitute.com. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go to my website, Dan Leroy, that's Leroy.com. I'll be happy to sign one up for you any way you like and ship it out to you, and you can find out more about my other books and public appearances and all the rest of it there as well.
Well, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure, and certainly we'll root down and find out all about your work. Dan, have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the chance to talk about the book. Happy 4th of July to you and everybody there.